Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX1for1 here, also known as Paul, bringing you another pair of Ace in a Day gameplays for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's instalment I shall be reviewing the F4U-1a Corsair. To give you a small historical overview on the Corsair and the iteration we see here in War Thunder, the F4U Corsair was a plane designed by Chance Vault. It was their response to the February 1938 specification outlined by the United States Aeronautical Naval Bureau for a single-engine fighter which could attain the maximum possible speed. Additionally, the plane was to have a range of 1,600 kilometers and be able to manage a stall at speeds no longer in excess of 110 kilometers an hour. The plane was to also field at least 4 machine guns. Vault's response was the one that fielded the most powerful engine available to the United States at the time, a Pratt & Whitney XR2800 double wasp engine providing 1,805 horsepower. To accommodate this engine, the largest diameter propeller blade had to be introduced at the time. To accommodate both of these items and allow the plane to be landed safely, the inverted gull wing design had to be added in order to provide ample ground clearance. With this design going ahead, the plane saw its maiden test flight as of the 29th of May 1940 to great success. A number of other test flights and refinements saw the plane surpass a speed of 400 miles an hour, also known as 640 kilometers an hour to you and me, in level flight as of the 1st of October 1940, an achievement only rivaled by that of the P-38 Lightning earlier on. With all that being said, the Corsair was to see a number of improvements before being introduced into mass production, most notably in the armament being up to 6 50 caliber Browning machine guns in response to the experiences from the Second World War to date. Moreover, the plane originally featured a birdcage or razorback canopy. As a result, this restricted visibility and meant that the plane was very difficult to land on a carrier. Ergo, pilots refrained from using the plane in a carrier role and instead employed it from air bases on land. Ergo, this plane saw very little service during the opening years of the war in the Pacific between the United States and the Japanese, and instead was employed from a land-based role, taken off from airfields as part of the United States Marine Corps. The most notable starting date being the February of 1943, whereby the United States Marine Corps Air Force took off from Guadalcanal in a wing of Corsairs. The F4U-1a was designed to rectify this problem, featuring a number of upgrades from the traditional Corsair, the most notable being the introduction of a bubble-style canopy, and also the raising of the cockpit seat so that the pilot had the greatest visibility possible for landing, especially with the difficulty associated with the rather large and bulky hose nose. Moreover, the landing gear was strengthened to stop the plane from bouncing all over the place upon hitting the carrier deck, and the engine was up to an R2800 8W engine, which had roughly the same horsepower but provided the pilot with more emergency power in the form of a water injection. This plane, along with all the Corsair types, helped to turn the balance in the favour of the United States Naval Air Force over the course of the war in the Pacific, especially in the latter years, simply because this plane was employed against the much more manoeuvrable A6M Ryzen via energy tactics. Rather than try and dogfight with an opponent which was much more manoeuvrable at low to mid speeds, instead, Corsair pilots quickly learned that they could outclimb and outdive their opponent. Ergo, they perform high-speed runs using their high-speed manoeuvrability in order to try and get a shot on target and hopefully rip them apart with the Browning 50 cals. If not, they could rinse and repeat, and with the superior numbers in the end, take down their foes. With that all being said, how exactly does the F4U-1a Corsair hang up in War Thunder? Well, the reason why I elected to show 2 gameplays instead of 1 is because both gameplays were rather short and ended prematurely. However, this first gameplay, an airfield domination gameplay on the map Korsun, highlights what happens, in my opinion, when you have an F4U-1a Corsair and you have the ability to abuse its most potent tactic, boom and zoom, in a high altitude domination advantage. The second gameplay will reflect this, but with me having to achieve the advantage of controlling the higher altitude domination field and then dropping down on opponents at a later date. Sticking to this gameplay for now, the role I like to employ the Corsair in is a boom and zoom category. I like to be the highest plane on the map apart from say enemy bombers, and gradually descend on enemy fighters, and this is where my setup comes in handy. I have stealth ammunition for my 50 cals. The reason why I use stealth is so that when I open fire in a boom and zoom run, I do not have to worry about my opponent seeing the tracers. Instead, the only time they're going to work out that I'm coming down on them is if they look behind them to see me descending, or they start to take hits from my 50 cals, at which point they should already be losing maneuverability and their wing frame, or their airframe I should say. I have a 500 meter gun convergence because that allows me to get a significant portion of spread, and because I will not be behind my opponent at very close range for an extended period of time, I do not need the convergence any tighter. An example being my descent on this Dornier 217J1, whereby my convergence allows me to eventually take out their rear gunner and set them on fire. As I descend in and jam my guns by being a little bit eager with the trigger finger, I break off in order to reload, clear the guns, and this will descend into my 4th kill. The crucial things to note thus far from my setup, and I have a 30-minute fuel load just to add, is that while I have difficulty in engaging targets at very close range, or indeed at very long ranges due to my convergence, the reason the convergence works rather well in my opinion is simply because I can get a nice spread on target and hopefully hit a critical wing surface at that vital moment as I descend into my boom and zoom run. As seen here, this P-40 Kitty Hawk is pretty much oblivious to my presence as I descend and pass away, to achieve what will be my 5th kill essentially. Again, we have used our very good dive speed here to get away from the F6F which could have chased after us, and that glancing hit from the A20G Havoc and their 50 cal just goes to show that we're able to take a few hits and indicates that we're flying quite a durable plane, as you're going to see. Indeed, this plane was noted for its historical durability, and this is reflected in War Thunder. Moreover, throughout the course of this gameplay, while we've taken very little damage, indeed we've had the advantages all the way through the game, we've always employed the plane in a high energy state boom and zoom, and we should note that while our manoeuvrability and roll rate seem to lock up or stiffen at about 600 km an hour, it hasn't really impeded our ability to gain those 5 kills to make our ace, although we did screw up our boom and zoom run there on that lag-free 11. As the game comes to its close, it's time to review some stats. With that game allowing us to unlock our final bomb pylon modification for the F4U-1a, we now reflect by noting that our 5 kills netted us 7,752 silver lines. Additionally, we earned 816 research points, with 326 of those going towards our research on the F82E Twin Mustang. We reflect by noting that while that gameplay was rather short and ending prematurely, we managed to abuse a very good situation, and indeed the overall characteristics of our plane, in order to achieve our ace. The Corsair was known historically for its ability to dive well and climb well, and we reflect that in the game. We managed to achieve the higher altitude dominance using our superior climb rate, or a climb rate which is comparable, if not superior, to our contemporaries at our battle rating of 3.0, at which point we then converted our energy stance into dive energy and descended on a number of opponents, catching them by surprise, and using our 50 cals to great effect in combination with the stealth ammunition to achieve those kills. We reflect that note by noting that your manoeuvrability locks up at about 600 km an hour in terms of roll rate and overall control surface responsiveness to a degree. And also we should note that I at no point tried to engage an opponent below a speed of 400 km an hour, and this is reflected in the future game, as this is where your manoeuvrability seems to fall off, below 400 km an hour that is. By comparison to the rest of our team, we see that we came first, but by a very small margin, and that is due to the lack of adolescence development of that game. Ergo, very shortly we will move on to our second gameplay, where we show a slightly longer game, and how exactly we deal with the situation when we can't always outclimb our opponents at the very beginning. So we continue our review by now looking at a ground strike gameplay on the map Gorge. I'm using the same setup of stealth ammunition at a 500 meter gun convergence with a 30-minute fuel load, and we open the game by our standard web climbing technique. You're going to see very shortly that I'm unable to achieve the higher altitude dominance that I would like to have achieved by comparison with that airfield domination gameplay on the map Korsun, which we've already reviewed. Ergo I have to use what the Corsair was noted for historically in order to achieve altitude supremacy. Indeed, its climb rate's very good, but we also specialise in our ability to maintain great speed on the level and indeed during a dive. For those of you who may have noticed already if you've played the F4U-1a and the F4U-1d, the 1a will feel quite sluggish. That is because it is using an original and early version of the R2800 Pratt & Whitney double wasp engine, by comparison with the upgraded versions. The difference is approximately 200 to 400 horsepower, but it is noticeable between the two planes. With our historical note out of the way, we see that a Yak 7 and a P400 have both managed to climb up to the same altitude as ourselves, if not two Yak 7s and even one Ki-61s gradually making their way up. Go at the P400 coming directly towards us. I go into a shallow dive to gain energy while they bleed it in the form of their climb. Opening fire at 1.3 kilometers, we're unable to achieve a hit, and so we use our maneuverability with speed and indeed our powerful rudder in order to dodge incoming fire. Instantly we break away because I know that if I'm going to try and turn fire at the P400, if they don't get me eventually, the Yak 7 and the approaching Ki-61, which you'll see shortly, there you go, will all try and get a shot on me. Ergo, I can use my great speed on the level and from that small dive in order to just run away and retain and build energy. Soon my opponents decide to turn away, simply because they know they're not going to catch me. If they had been persistent in this regard, I would have gone into a split S as you see here. And I believe actually the Ki-61 does continue to pursue me for quite a bit of time. Oh no, they've broken off. My mistake. So as you can see from that split S, we once again built up our energy, and with the Ki-61 diving away, we now begin to retaliate by noting that the P400 and another P400 seem to be pretty oblivious to the fact that while this Corsair ran, it hasn't quite disappeared from the higher altitude regions of the map. And so we use our maintained energy in order to start encroaching up behind this P400 and take them by surprise as they break round and try and fly over us, achieving our first kill and levelling out once again and using a sprinkling of WEP in order to keep our speed up. We begin to approach the second P400 very sharply. Again, I hope this demonstrates the qualities of the F4U by comparison with the rest of its battle rating contemporaries, that it is a very fast aircraft and can even match, say, the P-47D Thunderbolt in terms of speed and dive speed. Having taken out that second P400 and putting some extra bullets in order to make sure they're down for the count, we're already at 2 kills, and we did that by simply using what was historically done in the Corsair. So now we continue to climb and note that there are a number of enemy bombers which need to be eradicated. We are the only fighter on our team which is up at these higher altitudes, and while I make my way over towards taking out what will be that SM-79, let us reflect on the overall manoeuvrability of the plane and performance of the plane with altitude. I have not noticed in particular any altitude range where this plane seems to pick up or slow down in terms of both speed and manoeuvrability. Indeed, if I had to recommend an altitude range, somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 metres is probably the optimum, just because at those altitudes you have room to dive away and therefore pick up speed, but at the same time you're at an altitude whereby you can always break away or engage a multitude of targets, whether they be fighters or bombers, approaching or running away. At lower altitudes, of course, you sacrifice the ability to gain energy through a power dive, and at much higher altitudes there's probably no point, simply because most bombers at your battle rating will not try to go or even reach 7,000 metres or more by the time of the end of the game, unless they're flying something such as a Blenheim and they've spent the whole game trying to do so, as I've found out on a number of occasions. So, we switch our emphasis from that Junkers 88A4 to this SM-79 Sarajevo, simply because the Junkers 88 has dived and ergo is no longer a viable target. We come about on this SM-79 as they try to pass underneath us, opening fire early to cause them to deflect their path, and then we come in nice and tight behind the SM-79 and put our 50 cals to work, taking out one engine and then the second, setting all of the plane on fire to achieve kill number 3. I then dive around to try and go for the Junkers 88, but a friendly Hurricane Mark II is onto the back of them and has taken them out with their rockets, meaning that there was no need for me to even try to engage. Ergo, we have inherited the higher altitude dominance position, and now we can start to pick our targets when and where necessary, by firstly reverting to the role of bomber escort. On the horizon there is a friendly Wellington, along with a friendly H6K, and a number of other friendly bombers. Now we've just got to look for the targets trying to take them out, with the SM-79 being a little bit lower in altitude and probably being the focal point for enemy fighters. Another aspect to reflect on in terms of the Corsair is what was true to its historical counterpart, its absolutely brutal durability. I've noted in game that this plane can absorb cannon rounds quite effectively. Of course, rounds from say a calibre of 30mm or more, especially high explosive, will rip a wing off, but even 20mm cannon rounds can be absorbed quite well by the structure of this plane. 12.7mm machine gun rounds can be absorbed in small doses, and even those of a 7.7mm machine gun. Ergo meaning that don't be afraid to take a few hits, especially if you're trying to run away from someone, because if they're after you and they're quite close, you should be able to extend the distance while taking only a few hits. Having got a little closer to our friendly bombers, we know that there's an enemy Focke-Wulf 190 who's quite low and doesn't seem to have much energy, but no interest in going for our friendly bombers. And so I type into the Wellington, stay up, because I will be going for the P40 very shortly, who seems to be bleeding energy very quickly. We look behind to confirm our suspicions that our Focke-Wulf 190A1 has lost interest in taking out the bombers, especially with our presence now being above them. As the P40 disappears in a small layer of cloud, I assume that the P40 is probably trying to brake very hard and has almost run out of energy. And as you can see, their outline has appeared and we go for the kill. A very simple and easy kill to achieve kill number 4. We then brake around, using our rudder and a combination of the combat flaps and elevator in order to make sure that we maintain a very good speed whilst turning, simply because speed is a necessity in this plane, as in all of the Corsairs. We then keep surveying the scene, making sure there are no other enemy fighters up at a similar altitude. Pardon me. And following that, really, this game boils down to another boom and zoom situation, whereby I can repeat what I did at Korsun. I start to note the lack of enemy fighters, and so I check the chat to make sure nobody's indicating an enemy fighter close by to their bomber, and I begin to glide down towards the enemy airfield, picking up on a KI-10 that's just appearing in the cloud layer. Coming down on them very quickly, this will be quite an easy kill hopefully. I almost botch it up simply because I don't give enough lead to the actual leading reticule, and that's one thing to note with the Corsair, especially in a boom and zoom run. While the ammunition is effective from the 50 cals, there will be moments where you just screw up the shot, or you put all the ammunition onto the target but it's just not quite effective. However, you just have that try again attitude in order to achieve the most from this plane. We now roll over onto a MiG-3 that's oblivious to our presence, giving a critical hit and causing them to break away. And then we go to pick on a Lag-3, who again is oblivious to our presence, and with all this energy we can catch them very nicely and achieve kill number 7. We then use our remaining 450 km/h speed just to break away, but we're in a situation where we're not under threat, and indeed anyone who's chasing after us has got to make a significant energy overhaul to even get within touching distance. Ergo, we're safe, secure, and it's a successful boom and zoom run with 3 kills. To reiterate my point about the armament, while it is a potent armament, sometimes it will just seem to let you down, or I've found that personally. I've sometimes put a lot of bullets into a target just to have no effect. At close, or even long range really, and hence the reason why I use a 500m gun convergence is because this is the natural gun convergence for me if I'm trying to boom and zoom, unless I'm using a cannon based armament. However, that's not here. Still, with a 500m gun convergence it means that if we're behind a bomber at long range we can get a significant spread on target, and when we're descending on an enemy fighter who's oblivious of our presence, we can open fire at long range and assume that a large number of bullets are going to hit their overall airframe. The 50 cals won't let you down all the time, indeed you just got to be careful with your trigger finger and where you aim. I start to dive on an enemy Messerschmitt 110 I believe, having noted that the game's coming to its end, and that friendly bomber will be in no harm from that Messerschmitt 109, but the game comes to its end just a little prematurely for myself. Ergo, let's review a second set of stats for another game. Upon reflection from this second game, we see that our 7 kills netted us 22,330 silver lines. Additionally, we earned 6,120 research points, and that being due to a victory and a 4 times bonus, as part of the Summertime Madness event. 2,447 of those research points went towards our research on the twin Mustang. This gameplay probably showed what the gameplay on Korsun did not. The idea that when you are up against opposition which can climb to the same altitude as you, and therefore match your rather good climb rate, you are able to get away from them by simply using your ability to dive, and dive quickly. By comparison with most battle racing contemporaries, you will be able to outrun them in a dive, and once you break onto the level, your overall ability to maintain a very high top speed on the level will be much superior to that of your opponents, meaning that they will either break off or struggle to catch up with you, and if they do decide to continue pursuing you, you can always break into a split S, raise your nose up and go for that crucial head-on pass, and if you both pass each other then, you can always use your rudder and lower speed in order to stall around on your opponent, or you can break back into another dive. By comparison with the rest of our teammates, we see that we came first once again, by a slightly larger margin this time, signifying the development of that match by comparison with the one on Korsun, and also our more crucial and successful role as an energy fighter that dominated the higher altitudes, and also went into a boom and zoom capacity at the end. Ergo, the Corsair, the F4U-1a, matches his historical counterpart, being fast both in the dive and on the level, and not afraid to be manoeuvrable at high speed, especially with that absolutely deadly armament of 650 caliber Browning machine guns. With all that being said, if you're in a fighter, and you look behind you and you see an F4U-1a behind you, you better be careful, because this plane will be whistling your death. And with all that being said, I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies!